The smell of bleach and old paper fills the air. A claustrophobic warehouse lit by a single yellow light bulb hanging from the ceiling, buzzing. Elena is on the cold concrete floor, huddled between cleaning buckets and forgotten file boxes. Her hands aren't shaking from the cold but from the adrenaline pulsing through her veins. With a quick, desperate movement, she shoves a worn notebook into an empty bucket and covers it with a dirty cloth. Too late. The metal door creaks, a sharp sound that pierces the silence. The shadow of Isabella, the imposing owner of the school, looms over her. "Elena, what are you doing here in the dark?" Isabella's voice is sharp, impatient. "I thought I made it clear that you were not to wander around the school after hours." But Elena's eyes are not on Isabella. They are fixed, terrified, on a single crumpled sheet of paper left behind on the floor. A page from a fantasy novel that has sold over 1 million copies, written by a mysterious author known to the world only as Anya Novak. An author who at that moment was just a terrified cleaning lady on the floor. From which city or country are you watching us now? We want to know how far our stories reach. If you've ever felt invisible to those who see you every day, stay with us. Today's story is about a woman who was a shadow in the corridors and became the voice of a generation. Subscribe now so you don't miss a second of what's to come. Her name is Elena Petrova. She arrived in Brazil from Poland with her family more than 20 years ago, bringing with her few possessions and an accent that time has never been able to completely erase. Her life is a predictable script, a routine that acts as a shield against a world that assaults her senses. Waking up before sunrise, the swaying of the crowded bus, the smell of reheated coffee in the staff kitchen, and then cleaning. The methodical act of scrubbing, polishing, and organizing is a balm. The steady rhythm of the mop on the floor, the muffled sound of the cloth against the glass, all of this calms the chaos that the noise of the children, the fluorescent lights, and the frenetic energy of Primrose School cause in her mind. Elena was diagnosed with autism as an adult. Before the diagnosis, she was just the weird one, slow, in a world of her own. The words of others, spoken without malice but with the weight of judgment, echoed in her head like a cruel mantra. The school, with its bustling hallways and crowded classrooms, is a sensory minefield. But the storage room is her sanctuary. There, the strong smell of cleaning products grounds her, brings her back to her own body. The almost complete silence allows the voices in her head, the voices of her characters, to finally speak. It is in this forgotten cubicle that Elena transforms into Anya Novak. In old notebooks, on the back of discarded school flyers, she builds worlds. Her book, The Guardian of Silence, is an epic saga about a heroine who lives in a noisy and chaotic society, and whose greatest power lies not in her sword or magic, but in her ability to hear what no one else can. A metaphor for her own life. She writes with the urgency of someone who needs to breathe, but loneliness is her constant companion. She is a ghostwriter of her own existence. She spends her days polishing surfaces so that others can see their reflections, while she herself remains a blur, a peripheral figure. She remembers every time Mrs. Isabella Rossi passed her in the hallway, her gaze focused on some problem at the end of the hallway, never on her. A quick nod, sometimes not even that. To the principal, Elena was not a person with a story, but a function, the function of keeping the floors shiny. And this invisibility while protecting her hurt her deeply. It was a constant reminder that the universe she carried within her was doomed to live and die in the darkness of that warehouse, before resigning herself to complete anonymity. There was a spark of hope, quickly extinguished by the unintentional cruelty of the world. One day, moved by an impulse of courage that cost her days of anxiety, Elena decided to test her words. Not her name, just the words. She transcribed a short story, a small tale parallel to her great epic in impeccable, anonymous handwriting. It was a story about a bird that was afraid to sing. With her heart pounding against her ribs, she left it on the mahogany desk of Mr. Dubois, the EAE literature teacher, a passionate Frenchman who was always talking about the importance of discovering new voices. The next day, while cleaning the windows in the teacher's lounge, she heard him. Mr. Dubois was holding the pages, laughing with a colleague. "Look at this," he said with his thick accent. Some student with a vivid imagination and a complete lack of narrative structure. "It's creative, I guess." and with a dismissive gesture, he crumpled up the story of the bird that was afraid to sing and threw it into the blue recycling bin. Elena felt as if the air had been stolen from her. Each word he uttered was a stone thrown at the fragile window of her self-esteem. It wasn't a personal attack. He had no idea where those pages had come from, but it hurt in a much deeper way. The rejection wasn't directed at Elena, the cleaning lady. It was directed at her soul, naked and anonymous, printed on those pages. There was another attempt, a writing group that met at a bookstore in the city center. She went in, sat in a corner, the sweaty notebook on her lap. The conversation revolved around literary agents, advances, international fairs, a vocabulary from a distant planet. When it was her turn to speak, she hesitated. The difficulty in modulating her tone of voice and maintaining eye contact made the others shift uncomfortably in their chairs. They gave her empty advice, verbal pats on the back. Keep trying. Maybe start with something smaller. A blog. The implicit message was crystal clear. You don't belong in this club. These experiences were the walls that locked her in her cocoon. Anya Novak could be a giant in the world of fantasy, but Elena Petrova was a cleaning lady. And the world, it seemed, had no room for both of them to be the same person. The pain of these false hopes did not break her. On the contrary, she channeled it into her writing, making her fictional world an even richer and more detailed refuge, a place where the misunderstood were not only accepted, but revered. Isabella Rossi wasn't a bad person. She was an overwhelmed woman. She had inherited her parents' school and felt the weight of a legacy on her shoulders. She lived in a whirlwind of cost spreadsheets, parent complaints, school board demands, and the constant pressure to keep Primrose School an elite institution. She saw the world through a lens of efficiency and problem-solving. In her eyes, Elena was a cog that worked perfectly in the machine. Quiet, punctual, efficient. She never complained, never asked for anything. Perfect. Isabella had no time or mental energy to wonder what lay behind that silence. The tension between these two worlds was about to explode. The school was organizing its biggest annual literary fair, and ironically, the guest of honor was a renowned literary critic, Antoine Leclerc, who had written a brilliant and passionate review of The Guardian of Silence, Anya Novak's book. He called it The Anonymous masterpiece of the decade. The school was buzzing. Isabella ran through the hallways like a general before battle, shouting orders. Have the flowers arrived? Where's the buffet? Does the library need another cleaning? Is it spotless? It was in this state of fury and stress that she burst into the storeroom. And she found Elena, not cleaning, but sitting on the floor, a notebook on her lap, her pen flying across the paper with fierce concentration. It was the scene from the beginning, but now, laden with the full weight of the situation. Elena! Isabella's voice cracked like a whip. I don't pay you to write stories on my time. She didn't even look at what Elena was writing. To her, it was irrelevant. It was a deviation from her duties, a problem to be corrected. I want this place sparkling in 10 minutes and don't let this happen again. Are we clear? Elena cringed, hiding her notebook as if it were contraband. The humiliation was overwhelming. There she was, just a few feet away, from where the literary world was preparing to celebrate her work, being scolded for creating. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. The conflict was not between a heroine and a villain. It was the clash of two human realities that occupied the same physical space but existed in completely different universes, separated by an abyss of prejudice, status, and pure and simple ignorance. The change did not come with a thunderclap, but with a whisper, and the agent of that change was an 8-year-old boy named Leo. Leo was a student at Primrose, a child who lived on the margins. Small for his age, with thick glasses and a stutter that worsened when he was nervous, he was an easy target for bullies. His fortress was the school library. Leo saw Elena in a way that no one else did. He didn't see the cleaning lady. He saw a companion in silence, an ally in a world of people who observe more than they speak. One day, after a particularly cruel incident in the playground, Leo hid behind a bookcase in the library, crying quietly. Elena was there, dusting the books. She saw him. She didn't say a word. She didn't ask any questions. She just approached him and took a small wooden bird, carved with incredible detail, out of her bag. It was Kale, one of the winged messengers from his saga. She placed the bird on the table in front of Leo and went back to her work. That silent gesture opened a door between them. Leo began to look for her. He talked, and she listened. He told her about the worlds he visited in books, especially his absolute favorite, The Guardian of Silence. "Anya Novak understands me," he said one day, with adult seriousness. "She knows what it's like to feel different." Elena's heart tightened, a bittersweet mixture of joy and panic. The real turning point came on a Friday afternoon. In a hurry to leave, Elena dropped a page from her draft near the storage room door. It was a new scene, one that didn't exist in any published book yet. Leo found it. The handwriting was different, but the voice was unmistakable. The rhythm of the sentences, the choice of words, the soul bleeding onto the paper. It was Anya Novak. Leo was paralyzed. The initial shock gave way to a feeling of reverence. He didn't rush to tell anyone. He didn't confront her. Instead, the next day, he found Elena in the hallway, approached her, and simply whispered, "Kale is safe with me." He became the guardian of her secret. And for the first time, Elena's universe had another inhabitant. Leo's friendship was like water on dry land. He became her first and only reader. He read the drafts she gave him in secret, his eyes shining with admiration. "This is even better than the first book, Elena," he would say, his stutter disappearing when he talked about her world. The pure, unfiltered validation of a child was more powerful than any literary criticism. Small victories began to blossom. Elena began to be able to hold Leo's gaze for a few seconds. Then she was able to answer his questions about the characters in complete sentences. Her voice, though soft, steady. These were monumental achievements for her. The biggest victory, however, came during the literary fair. The critic, Antoine Leclerc, was on stage, his eloquent voice echoing through the crowded auditorium as he extolled the genius of Anya Novak. "The author teaches us that there is immense strength in silence, wisdom in those whom society marginalizes," he said. Elena was in the back, near the exit, her usual spot, invisible in the shadows. Leclerc began to read an excerpt aloud, Leo's favorite passage. As Elena's words, spoken by another's voice, filled the hall, Leo, sitting in the front row with the other students, slowly turned around. He searched for her in the crowd. Their eyes met, and then he smiled a small, knowing smile, a gesture that said, "That's you. I know. And it's amazing." In that moment, under the lights that celebrated her work but not her, Elena didn't feel like a fraud. For the first time, she felt like an author. The glory wasn't a trophy or a check, but the admiring gaze of her only friend. It was a silent victory, witnessed by only two people, but it reshaped her entire inner world. While Elena basked in her secret victory, Isabella Rossi's world was publicly falling apart. The book fair, which was supposed to be her big break, ended up attracting unwanted scrutiny. Revenge from a former accountant, fired for just cause, brought to light minor financial irregularities, now magnified by panic and gossip. Auditors were called in. Influential parents made angry phone calls. Her family's legacy, Primrose School, was under threat. One night, tormented by insomnia and fear, Isabella wandered through the empty, silent corridors of her school. It was a skeleton of what it was during the day, and she felt just as hollow. Guided by an impulse she couldn't explain, she ended up in the storage room. Perhaps she was looking for old files, proof that would clear her name. But what she found was something else. Behind a pile of dusty yearbooks, there was a cardboard box. Inside were dozens of notebooks. Elena's neat handwriting filled every page. She recognized the name Anya Novak from the fair's promotional materials. Curiosity, a beacon in the fog of her despair, overwhelmed her. She sat down on the cold floor, the smell of bleach invading her nostrils, and began to read the first notebook. And she didn't stop. The sun began to rise, casting streaks of light through the dirty hallway window. And Isabella was still there, on the floor of the storage room, surrounded by Elena's worlds. Shock was the first wave. A tsunami of shame followed. Every word she read was a mirror reflecting her own ignorance. She remembered every time she had passed Elena and not seen her, every harsh command, every glance that pierced the cleaning lady as if she were made of glass. She saw the school through Elena's eyes. The noisy playground, the glaring lights, the casual cruelty of the children, the indifference of the adults. But she also saw the beauty that Elena captured, the deep empathy for those who, like Leo, lived on the margins. The book wasn't just fantasy, it was the truth. The accountant's revenge had brought her to moral bankruptcy, but the discovery in that warehouse offered a chance at redemption. Her business crisis suddenly seemed small, insignificant, in the face of the magnitude of the talent she had ignored, humiliated, and almost crushed, day after day. The next morning, Isabella waited for Elena at the service entrance. She was holding one of the notebooks. Her face was marked by a sleepless night, her eyes red. There were no excuses ready, no corporate speeches. "I read it," Isabella said, her voice breaking. "Elena, or Anya, I have no words to describe how blind I was. The only thing I can say is, forgive me." Elena stood motionless, her body rigid, prepared for the final blow, the dismissal, the accusation of time theft. But the blow did not come. Isabella's vulnerability was palpable, her pain genuine. She didn't just apologize, she opened up. She confessed her fear of failure, the pressure that was suffocating her. In that service hallway, two women who lived on different planets finally found each other in the universal language of human frailty. The culmination of this transformation was an urgently convened school assembly. Isabella took the stage, not with her usual arrogance, but with a humility that silenced the auditorium. She spoke about labels, about the danger of judging people by their roles, and about the treasures that lie hidden in plain sight. "We are honored to have among us one of the greatest voices in contemporary fantasy literature," she said, her voice steady. "Many of you have read her work and been moved by it, and today, she would like you to meet her." A dramatic pause, and then, "Please, a round of applause for the author of The Guardian of Silence, Ms. Elena Petrova." The silence was absolute. It was followed by a murmur of confusion, which turned into a tidal wave of applause when Elena hesitantly took the stage. Leo, in the front row, cried and applauded with all his might. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. Elena is still autistic. Crowds still exhaust her. Fame is an uncomfortable garment she is learning to wear, but she is no longer invisible. The school, under Isabella's new leadership, has implemented a neurodiversity support program. The old storage room has been transformed into a cozy office with a large window and a sign on the door, "Elena Petrova, writer." Sometimes after work, she still picks up a mop and cleans her office. Not out of obligation, but because the rhythm calms her. It's a reminder of who she was, and a foundation for everything she has become. Pain is still part of her story, but now she has the tools, the friendship, and the hope to build her own happy endings. A person's value is not in the role they play, but in the worlds they are capable of creating. And sometimes the brightest universes are born in the silence of places no one cares to look. If Elena and Isabella's story touched you in any way, made you think or feel, like this video and comment on what moved you the most. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Share it. Someone who feels invisible may need to hear this today.